Good evening. It's about time the BBC faced a day of reckoning. Last night, the Director General and the Chief Executive of News both resigned. Yes, this Director General.
I also think we're doing a reasonably good job of walking along the joyous tightrope of the culture wars, where, being progressive, diverse, doing the things we should be proud of is not woke.
And this CEO of News, who's clearly still in total denial.
I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
Well, there is institutional bias at the BBC. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. Just look at what happens when their neutral reporters leave the BBC. They all come out as raging left-wingers. Goodall, Mateless and Sopel do a left-wing podcast together. Goodall was the policy editor at Newsnight. Mateless was their flagship presenter. And Sopel was their chief political correspondent and North America editor. They're all moaning, oh, there's no institutional bias against Trump. Well, here's Emily Mateless losing her mind when Trump won.
When Donald Trump talked about the eating cats and dogs, half of America was just thinking, this is bad. I can't believe what he's saying. This is going to be the end of him.
Yeah, stop swearing, Emily. I think she later stormed off and then had to come back. And here's Sopel going into bat for Hugh Edwards.
We now know there was no illegality. So what are you left with? Someone's private life has come under scrutiny, who is now unwell. I think it would be a crying shame if this is the last we see of Hugh Edwards on television, when the allegations have turned out to be not that much.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that President Trump has threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion if the corporation doesn't apologise and basically take down the documentary about him. Do you remember Andrew Marr? He left. Shock horror. He appears to be a massive left-winger too. Here he is on Question Time after Labour won.
And suddenly, for once, for the first time in many of our lives, actually Britain looks like a little haven of peace and stability. And that in itself is going to draw money into this country.
Oh, gosh. The BBC has an institutional pro-transgender bias. Negative stories about the trans people are allegedly kept off air. And look at what I have here, OK? So this is an email from an LGBT and identity reporter at the BBC. If we can bring that up. What does it say at the bottom? Look at that. What does it say at the bottom? There. Yeah. The BBC logo in the colours of the rainbow flag. And then it says he's an LGBTQ plus ally and supports inclusion. Oh, yeah, no bias there at all. No bias at all. And that's why the BBC included drag queens on their list of influential, inspirational mothers. There you are. They try to insert trans people into as much stuff as possible.
I knew that I was transgender since I was 4.
You'd never know, would you? They also removed the fact that a convicted paedophile was actually a drag queen and a pride event organiser. They even made aliens non-binary.
Meep. Yes, the meep. I promise I can help him get home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she or they?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the meep.
Oh, I do that.
Oh, it's definitely something. And CBeebies even had a gender-neutral raccoon, just to really drive home that gender ideology to kids everywhere. They've got an anti-Israel, pro-Gaza, I would argue pro-Hamas bias. The BBC didn't want to refer to Hamas as a terrorist organisation. They did Hamas propaganda with the documentary they had to pull off air that starred the son of a Hamas minister. Now, because of last night's resignation, apparently their new acting head of news is this guy, Jonathan Munro, who tried to claim that it was fine for the BBC to use local Gaza journalists because Hamas doesn't control what they say.
They're not restricted in what they're able to see and show. There may be physical restrictions. For example, not many of them have got much fuel to go from one town to another, let's say, but there's no restriction on what they can show, what they can see and what they can film when they're on location.
But that's just obviously rubbish, isn't it? I mean, they've been pushing race theory for years.
Please let me your ears for this news I shall impart. May not have been told, we have been here from the start.
Yeah, but basically, I mean, just to summarise that, apparently, basically, there was just loads of black people in Anglo-Saxon Britain and all of that stuff. And, you know, of course, yeah. I mean, they have been influenced by Muslim pressure groups, like the Centre for Media Monitoring, which used to be an offshoot of the Muslim Council of Britain. BBC editor Richard Burgess even spoke at an event hosted by the Centre for Media Monitoring in Parliament. I mean, is it any wonder that they didn't do a huge amount of reporting on the rape gangs? I mean, how could they? When Emily Maitlis was there.
Do you not think, Emily, there's an issue with Pakistani Muslims raping working-class white underage girls? Do you not think there's an issue there?
I think there is an appalling issue with grooming when it hits any community and any age. We only ever hear you talk about Pakistani perpetrators.
Are you telling me there's no issue?
I'm telling you that you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist and you don't believe that there are white perpetrators of the same crime. Can you deny that?
Well, I mean, how could the BBC cover it when they were so desperate to tell us all about how great asylum seekers are and how much racism they suffer? They actually did a documentary about the Bedreddin brothers, who were later convicted for being ringleaders of a grooming gang in Newcastle. Yeah, even their ex-top sports presenter is a frothing lefty.
Slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October the 7th. And
which was awful, which was truly awful.
And that full context needs to be there when discussing what's going on.
But that's not the full context, is it?
Yeah, but look at what's happening. Look at what's happening. This is all about BBC bias. That's what the story is. The BBC pumping out misinformation around the world. The BBC platforming people who thought that Jews should be burnt like Hitler did. That's the story. That we all have to pay for that content or face criminal prosecution. That is the story. So what does the Labour Minister for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, say? Well, she makes it all about GB News.
Look, I think it's perfectly reasonable for politicians to appear on television and to play roles as presenters. What I don't think you can do is somehow pretend that that is news. It's opinion and it's polemic.
Well, Ms Nandy, I think that's a pretty risky game to play if you say that you're going to clamp down on GB News, because Nandy is facing calls to resign for failing to declare that she had received donations from the man that she picked to run England's new football regulator. He also donated to Sir Keir Starmer, who has, naturally, cleared her of all wrongdoing. I mean, you can try and take us on if you want, Ms Nandy, but I have a funny feeling that GB News will be around a lot longer than you or this Labour government. Let's get thoughts from my panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist Benjamin Butterworth, and Reform Party member, former Tory Party chairman Sir Jake Berry. So, Carol, this BBC thing, they've not learned anything, have they? Coming out, resigning, going, but there's no institutional bias at the
You had Deborah Turnus on there. You know, she actually, I don't think you read her resignation speech. She said to her journalists when she was leaving, I've never been more proud of the work you all do. What, faking the news? She also said, we will no longer be able to lead you in our vision of truth without agenda. Hello? Total agenda. Davey, his resignation speech, no remorse, no apology, no explanation, just saying what a fantastic lot of people they work with. These people don't get it. And then you have the chairman, Samir Shah, coming out at lunchtime, denying there was institutional bias and saying mistakes had been made. No, these weren't mistakes. The Trump film was a deliberate misrepresentation of what Trump said a week before the presidential election. This wasn't a mistake. It was completely deliberate. And you got people like Nick Robinson at the weekend, the Today presenter, actually saying this was part of a plot to bring down the BBC. It's not that they're pumping out fake news like China and Russia does. It's the fact that we're all trying to bring down the BBC. Today, almost every Labour MP is on Twitter saying it's still the most trusted news station in the world. No, it is not. They're not getting it. It's not trusted in London, never mind around the world.
Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, came out and was basically backing the BBC, saying, so we can't give in to people like Nigel Farage. Or stuff. Their ability, like Lisa Nandy did, to make a BBC story of institutional left-wing bias running right through the core of our state broadcaster, all about GB News and Nigel Farage. It's almost impressive.
I know, and Carol is right, because she captures how angry the public are about this. I just wanted to focus on Tim Davies' legacy that he's had, leading the BBC on £545,000 a year for 5 years. Let's not forget, he was brought in to sort the organisation out after the Jimmy Savile scandal. So he was brought in...
Bashir. It was after Mark
Well, it was Savile and Bashir. In his time there, he's overseen the Gary Lineker tweet scandal. He's overseen the Hugh Edwards scandal. He's overseen the scandal about the Gaza documentary, which was part presented by the son of a Hamas official. He's overseen the Bob Villan scandal. We've seen the scandal around Greg Wallace. We've seen Strictly Come Dancing brought down virtually as a show because of bullying row. I mean, this is not someone who's had a stellar career while receiving over £500,000 a year of our money. He has dragged this institution down, and, you know, Carol's right. People have lost trust with the BBC.
Well, Benjamin, if there's no institutional bias, why is it that when pretty much anyone of note leaves, they always go on and do this kind of pseudo coming out ceremony where it turns out that shock horror, they're all, sorry, I've hidden this well for years, but it turns out, I'm a massive lefty.
But of course that's codswallop, Patrick.
You are ridiculous.
Well,
you are totally ridiculous.
Well, take, for example, the founder of...
When does your podcast start? Come on, when are you going to let us know your left-wing?
Tell us the founder of this channel, Andrew Neil.
So he's one.
Right? A man who continues to be a regular columnist for the Daily Mail and on Times Radio, which are right-leaning outlets. Jeremy Paxman.
You describe Times Radio as a right-leaning
Jeremy Paxman came out as a One Nation Tory. John Humphreys, the flagship Radio 4 presenter, talked about how he votes Conservative and became a Daily Mail columnist. So there are three of the most famous political reporters that the BBC has had.
Let's drag it back to it more modern times.
So your point is not valid. It is wrong and it is misleading.
You don't think that there's an institutional left-wing bias there? What job did Amal Rajan used to do?
He was editor of The Independent.
The Independent, the left-wing newspaper.
Well, The Independent was independent. And so, you know, so was Andrew Marr. He was also editor of The Independent.
Right, there you go. Yes, so another left.
A neutral newspaper. But the point...
They're not neutral, are they?
The point is that you are trying to cherry-pick to mislead people. And actually, the whole reason...
Fake news.
The reason you hate the BBC is because it's impartial.
Listen,
that's why you're threatened by it.
The current row is about this dossier that was released that exposed all these horrendous things, but the major thing being that they misrepresented the president of the free world. And I really hope Trump does sue them for £1 billion quid, because they've got until Thursday at 5 o'clock. This is the other thing. Samir Shah, the chairman, said today, I'm considering issuing an apology to Donald Trump. He should be crawling on his belly to issue an apology, because if he doesn't, they're going to get sued for £1 billion quid, and quite right.
It's more than that, though, isn't it? It's things like editing out the fact that a paedophile was, not one that worked for the BBC this time, a paedophile was also a drag queen and a member of a local pride organisation group. So they've just removed that from an article. And then they've got reporters that work for them with I'm an LGBT ally at the bottom of their thing. I mean, that's institutional bias, isn't it?
So I think the challenge you have is like all of these big state-funded or publicly funded institutions, they basically start to exist not to serve the public who pay for them, but to actually serve their own agenda and their own needs. Why no one thinks that they have any institutional bias at the BBC is because they all agree with each other. And they go to work and they say, well, did you see that article in The Guardian or The Independent? Oh, wasn't it wonderful? And that's the challenge, is there's no mindset that goes in there and says, well, actually, what do the British public think? It's all about what the BBC thinks. And you have, and that's what people are fed up with. And let's not, it's 180 quid the licence fee. If you don't pay it, you go to prison. So I'm perfectly happy for the BBC to carry on and produce great radio programmes like The Archers and things like that, things I enjoy. But I want the British public to be given the ability to support the BBC if they think it produces content they want. And if we created a subscription, I think the BBC would actually be better.
But the idea that everyone running the BBC is left-wing is nonsense, because Sir Robbie Gibb was in Theresa May's Conservative government. Nick Robinson...
Theresa May's Conservative government.
Yes.
You're not going to
was he a political...
Nick Robinson was chair of his Conservative Party at Oxford University.
Hello, right? Nick Robinson this morning tried to
Tim Davies was a Conservative council candidate.
Can I just say, this is just a slightly thing I will point out about Nick Robinson, is that a dinner event held not so long ago, which Nick Robson was at, during which he was pretty vile, actually, and made it quite clear his views on GB News. And the idea to claim that Nick...
Is that the one I was at?
Possibly, yes. The idea that he is not...
He tried to do a defence.
I personally find
He tried to do like an impartial defence this morning of what's being happened, and he couldn't bloom and do it. He had a whole slew of guests on saying how fantastic the BBC was, and it wasn't institutionally biased. And the problem here is they can't change because they can't fix what they won't acknowledge. Right. So if they're not acknowledging it's biased, how can they ever fix it? They've got to, unless you sack everybody, it's never going to get better, which is why they have to do what you've just said and defund it and let them do what they want, but we shouldn't have to...
But they will genuinely believe that they're not biased because they all sit in meetings, they all agree with each other. It is the problem. It is that is the problem it has.
You say that.
It doesn't allow a diversity of views within the building.
Their own reporters this week, there's some this morning actually said, every day this week they have met the board members and the top execs trying to decide what kind of statement they should make and what they could say. They couldn't agree. A whole week has gone by and the BBC, the state corporation, has not put a statement out until today.
What you're trying to do is take a handful of mistakes, and the Trump edit was clearly a mistake, and trying to make that reflective. You've had your chance. Trying to make that reflective of 21,000 employees, news output that occurs 24 hours a day across the entire globe. There are many stories which are of huge value and huge public service journalism, and the idea that one mistake is reflective of that organisation is nonsense. And the truth is, I would believe the BBC on accuracy and impartiality over Donald Trump any day of the week.
He's got a fact about how many mistakes the BBC
made in the course of a day. So they made two a week. They made two a week, and which may not be as many as people think. But the challenge is that documentary wasn't just a mistake; it was an attempt at international election interference.
Was it?
Well, of course it was. It mashed up Donald Trump's speech to pretend that he'd called for an attack on the Capitol building. It was completely untrue. What may not have been successful election interference, it was still an attempt at election interference. And I predicted this time last week that Donald Trump would sue the BBC. What I predict this week is they won't get the House in order by 5 o'clock on Friday to respond, and I suspect that Donald Trump will carry out his threat.
They're going to lose more license. They're going to lose more license space because people will listen to the statements that the chairman made today, saying that everyone's imagining the bias, and more people will drop the license.
Arrogance beyond belief.
We're going to move on, but yes, well, coming up actually.